Okay. All right. Hello. Um, this is just a video quickly uh, making sure you're very aware of um, the first part of your final project, which is the annotated score. Um, I may at certain times call this the score analysis. I may call it the annotated score. That means the same thing. And this is half of your final project. Your final project consists of a paper and an annotated score. That's what you'll turn in ultimately. And for each of those two halves, there will be a sort of a draft assignment. So for instance, on the, let me go to Moodle here. Here's our post-spring break plans. You can see there's important dates and calendar, which has assignment due dates and also like what we'll be talking about in weekly meetings, when there are tests, when everything's due. So the final project is due, as you can see, Wednesday, May 13th. Okay, that is a hard deadline, as I've said already. The first draft of your analysis is going to be due April 9th. That's your assignment 2. I'm sort of starting over with numbering assignments. So your first assignment due Thursday, April 2nd, is that Debussy assignment, which some of you have already done. And so you should be for sure working on that first draft of your analysis, which is due April 9th, the second Thursday after we're back. And that should be a complete but flawed analysis. So a draft doesn't mean you did half of it. Draft means you did all of it, and maybe there's still some issues, maybe there's still some things you don't quite understand, but I'll be helping you with that. In the first 2 weeks of classes, through videos, I'm going to be demonstrating for each of the 5 pieces. So no matter what piece you're going to be analyzing, I'm going to give a demonstration of myself doing a couple bars at least of analysis on those pieces, annotating the scores in the way you would. And I'm going to be doing it totally on my computer. For those of you who don't have access to a printer, this can be done by hand or it can be done on a computer. It doesn't matter. I'll be showing you on the computer because I don't have access to a printer. So I'll be showing you how to do that. So hopefully you will have a very clear idea of exactly what's expected from that annotated score um, before the draft is due. Just to continue talking about the final project, on April 30th, your assignment 4 is the draft of your paper is due. So you'll have a couple weeks to work on the analysis and get a draft. You'll have a few more weeks to get a rough draft of your paper. Okay? And then you'll have a couple weeks after that to shine both of those up into a final version. Okay, so I think it's doable time-wise. I want to go over what's expected of the annotated score. Okay. Present a thorough analysis of the following, clearly communicated in the score you hand in. By the following, I mean these things. You may choose to separately, that should say, you may choose to separately present different elements on multiple copies of the score. That means it may be easier for you if you just go through the whole score and just do harmony, and then go through the whole score and just do rhythm, go through just do melody, just to keep the score sort of uncluttered. So you're welcome to do that. You can separate them in that way. Or if you can find a neat way of doing it, you can layer all of these things onto a single score or on a couple scores. Find ways to make your analysis as readable and clear as possible. For example, color coding different kinds of information, consistent labeling, using a ruler for brackets and lines, etc. Both the accuracy and the visual clarity of your annotations will be graded. That's important. These need to be clear. Color coding is great. You can do it on If you're doing this on a computer, you can color code. There are many ways to handle that. By color coding, we mean like harmony is all going to be notated in red. Rhythm will all be notated in green. Melodic information will be notated in blue. Timbral information notated in fuchsia, whatever. And then that way, when I'm looking at the score, it's an easy way for me to see your analysis pop right out. Okay? You don't have to color code. You do have to be clear. So if that means separating out all these 4 levels of analysis onto different copies of the score, fine. Whatever it takes. Okay. Harmony. This is something we've done a fair amount. You should feel pretty comfortable with. Identify key areas. Provide lead sheet and Roman numeral analysis of each chord. Provide interpreted functional base analysis showing the syntax of each phrase. Label cadences. Okay, that should be pretty straightforward. You're going to have Roman numerals under the whole piece, whatever piece or section of a piece you're assigned to. You're going to have lead sheet symbols above the whole thing. If I were you, I would start here. I would do lead sheet symbols first. And I would do all of those because those you don't need to understand what key you're in. Those are non-contextual. So I would go through and do all lead sheets first. Then I would go and do key areas and Roman numerals, and then label the cadences. And then finally I would do functional base. That's interpreted functional base, which is the most sophisticated level of functional base. That's the one where we use the little parentheses and have prolongations. Now, like I said, one of the ways that doing this online and not on paper is more useful is that it's easier to change your work when you're doing it online rather than doing it by pen, with a pencil or something where you have to erase. So it might be a good idea to just in general do the drafts online, or on a computer, I mean. In any case, that's a lot of work. You're going to need to do the whole score. I'm going to be helping. I'm going to be available for things you're confused about. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it really should be a goal of yours to get a good chunk of that done as soon as possible. So start with your lead sheets, symbols for each chord, and then go to your Roman numerals. If you're not sure about keys, make educated guesses, and I'll help you. If you're not sure about functional base, start with the uninterpreted version. If you got a 1 chord, it's a T. If you got a 5 chord, it's an S. Or sorry, it's a D. If you got a 4 or 2, it's an S. 5, 7, D. 1 and 6, T. Right. So you can start with those, and then ask me for help about the interpreted if you need that help. And of course, I'll be meeting with all of you at least once a week. But I'm going to be super duper duper available. So do reach out if you need help. So harmony. I would start there because that's going to be maybe the most time-consuming part of this. The rest of these are going to be quicker. Rhythm. This is something we've only very briefly talked about. But you're going to identify perceptually important rhythmic groupings. Okay? That just means, are there any particular rhythms that are important to this piece? Maybe the melody is always like a dotted quarter to eighth, over and over again. The whole thing is filled with dotted quarter eighth, dotted quarter to eighth, dotted quarter eighth. That means that's an important rhythmic grouping, and that's something you would use as part of an analysis in your paper. Maybe there are 2 sections to your piece that contrast in various ways, and one of the ways they contrast is that one of them has, let's say, very straight eighth rhythms, and the other one has lots of triplets, something like that. And then that's going to be another way for you to use rhythm as a way of distinguishing between different sections of your piece. Now, how are you going to annotate this in your score? What you're going to do is, let's say it's that dotted quarters eighth. Rhythm is the most important rhythmic grouping. You would circle or bracket or put in a box, whatever's clear. Pick out that rhythm and put a notation that says, you could even name it, rhythmic motive A. And if that's the only important rhythmic motive in your piece, that allows you to then refer to that motive. Motive just meaning a little piece of information that's important in your paper. So you could say, as you can see in measure 15, motive A shows up all over the place, rhythmic motive A. So you can use your labeling system as a method for when you're writing your paper. You can refer to that and it becomes clearer. If there's more than one rhythmic characteristic that you think is important, you can circle the first. Maybe you're color coding it. Maybe all your rhythmic information is green. So you circle it in green, you write motive A. Then the second important contrasting rhythmic motive, you circle that in green, you write motive B. And then in your paper you can say, rhythmic motive A happens here, rhythmic motive B happens here. Oh, at this point they happen at the same time, and that happens as the same at the end of the piece, which gives it a special additional sense of closure because of these two rhythmic elements that were separate before have now sort of come together. Okay? So that's going to be not so bad. You're just going to find the important rhythmic groupings. Instances of syncopation and hemiola. We've only briefly talked about this, but syncopation, we'll be talking about it more, and hemiola. Syncopation just means an offbeat is being stressed, basically. So if you're in 4/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we expect a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. We expect the 1 to be particularly stressed. And we expect the 1, 2, 3, 4 to be more stressed than the and. So if you had a piece that was going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that was stressing all these ands, that's syncopation. And it can happen at many different levels. And again, this is something that may be in green if that's your rhythmic color. Let's make rhythm green. Rhythm. Let's make harmony pink. Let's make melody blue. And let's make timbre, purple. Gotta be. So if this were your color coding scheme here, then you would circle that instance of syncopation, and you could label it. You could put a green box around that measure and say this is syncopation 1 or syncopation A, just to give it a labeling thing. And then you can refer in your paper. As you can see in measure 15, there's this type of syncopation. Hemiola is a specific kind of syncopation where it's not just the fact that an offbeat is being stressed, but it's being stressed in a regular way that makes you feel like you're in a different meter than the piece is actually in. Okay? And again, that would be something you would bracket out or circle, or you could just draw a line over the measures that have the hemiola in them, a green line, saying and just marking it as hemiola, right? Just labeling it on your score. So that's the rhythmic dimension. Melody. Identify any pairs of parallel themes. You remember this? This was a part of our final project last semester, which seems like so long ago. Parallel and contrasting themes. Very simple idea. If you have a melody, and then you have that's in a phrase, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then you have another melody. And those melodies are like pretty similar. We call them parallel, right? If they're quite different, we'd call them contrasting. And so in blue, you could label your first melody, melody 1, or melody A. And then your second melody, if it's parallel, you could label it A prime. Let me show you what that would look like. All right. So imagine you have something like this. This is just the shape of your melody. That's your first melody. It goes up and down. It's kind of has that shape to it. We call it A. And then, the next melody is pretty similar shape. So that's A prime. Melody B changes a lot. It's got a bunch of jumps in it. Again, this is just sort of representing the shape. And then we have B prime. Prime just meaning that little one, that superscript there. And then, A double prime. A comes back. Okay. So you would just be labeling on your score again, above the melodies, A prime, to show these are parallel, these are contrasting. Okay. Recurring melodic themes or motives. Again, this is something you just circle, in this case in blue. Say, hey, there's always this dum dee da tritone going up to a fifth, just as an example. Happens over and over and over again in this piece. That's an important melodic motive. So you'd want to circle it and you'd want to label it. Motive X. Doesn't matter. So you can refer to it in your paper. Any disruptions of melodic expectations. So things where you say this looks like melody A, but then something crazy happens, like a big jump in register. Identify melodic non-chord tones if they figure heavily in your piece. So if you have a lot of non-chord tones, you would mark those too. Circle them, label them in the way we have done. And then timbre. Timbre includes accents, registral accent, agogic accent, textural accent, dynamic accent. Labeling those, perhaps in purple, as well as any significant mid-piece changes in instrumentation, register, dynamics, and or texture. And that's going to be very piece dependent. Like, this piece for orchestra starts with all strings, and then all of a sudden it's all winds. And that's something you could annotate in your purple crayon. Harold and the Purple Crayon. You ever read a Harold and the Purple Crayon? That's a great, great book. Registered dynamics, texture. That's going to be very piece specific. Okay, so I just wanted to walk through these things, and then over the next few video classes, I'm going to be looking at each and every one of the pieces you'll be analyzing, and analyzing them along all of these lines for a few bars, couple bars, depends how long it takes, just so you can see exactly what it looks like so you can get started. Okay? All right, I'm going to stop there. Hope you're doing well.